How important are CAPIs today? And do you need to implement 15 of them to cover all your partners? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds. My name is John Katsir. CAPIs. It seems like wherever you turn, you see conversion APIs these days. Meta probably was the first to make them a big deal. Google has them, TikTok, Snap, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter, Microsoft Advertising. Today, I want to dive into CAPIs, what they are, why they exist, how they work, how hard they are to get right, and what they do, what they improve. To chat, we have Singular's own Mike Gadd. He's a customer success director for EMEA in India. He has no fewer than 14 positions on his LinkedIn profile, including rock climbing instructor, which is pretty cool. He's also a pretty technical guy. I didn't know his background. He has a degree in mathematics. Welcome, Mike.
Hello.
Super pumped to have you and super pumped to talk about CAPIs. They've been becoming a bigger and bigger deal over the last few years. Let's start right on the bottom. Maybe there's a few people who don't know what they are. What are CAPIs? Why do they exist?
So I think the key thing is a CAPI is a bridge between your website generally and the advertising platforms that you're working with. So if you think about the app world where we've traditionally been with Singular in the past, like you have postbacks for your apps, and this is the equivalent to be able to pass back install information, event information, revenue information, and that allows the advertisers to be able to optimize. Now, with web, that's much more difficult. Traditionally, what would have happened on web is you would have put a pixel on your web page, and that would have been for every single advertiser you're using. So you would have a Meta pixel, you'd have a TikTok pixel, an AdWords pixel, etc. And so, this is a lot to maintain. Like you've got to maintain all of these pixels on your website. You've got to make sure all your privacy concerns are sort of covered. So you need to know what data you're passing on those pixels, all of that sort of thing. It was quite a confusing and laborious way of doing things and optimizing. And what CAPIs do is it allows you to relay information more effectively to those networks. And Singular specifically, that we basically manage that process. So everything comes through us. We have all the conversion API integrations, and it pushes all the data to those advertisers. Where it's really interesting is as we go into lots of other platforms, we can start talking about PC console. We can start talking about web app programs and things like that, which I'm sure we can talk about later.
Absolutely. We're going to get into all the use cases, where you use them, what they improve, what they do, all that stuff. There is also an in-app use case, correct?
Yes. So what you can do is we're seeing more and more customers who are using web advertising to drive to, say, landing pages and then download an app from there. And an interesting sort of use case for CAPIs is being able to actually understand what's going on in the app and use CAPIs to pass the information back to those networks, which wasn't possible before. You had a break before because you were doing web advertising and app activity. You had this gap of being able to do your optimization. Now with CAPIs, that's possible to be able to pass that back.
So the second part of the question is, why did they exist? And we know they started becoming a thing in around 2020 or so, and that kind of accelerated with iOS 14.5 and app tracking transparency. Why do they exist?
Well, I think in terms of they exist is because we need to have that two-way conversation with the networks. We need to be able to tell the networks what's working, what's not working on our platforms, so that they can optimize and they can get the best out of their targeting. In terms of ATT specifically, we've seen since the introduction of it, there's been much more diversification in the market. App advertising has never been easy, but it was easier. And now that we have iOS restrictions with ATT, it definitely makes it more challenging to run your app optimization campaigns. And so actually people are using web and other methods to be able to generate those installs. And so with different ways of doing things on different platforms, that's then needing other technology to be able to track and optimize effectively.
Yeah, so like my sense is, and you can tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong or just totally out in left field. My sense is obviously pre-ATT, you had IDFA, Facebook and others could basically see a lot of post-install events and get a lot of good data about what somebody was doing in your app, what they were doing, whether they're buying things, other things like that. That broke with ATT, and essentially the scarcity of IDFA and conversion APIs essentially kind of reestablish some of that data flow. Probably not as it's probably not tied to individual people as much, but some of that data flow so there can be better optimization. Am I out in left field, or is that basically it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely with the reduction in IDFAs, I mean, we're seeing maybe 10% of your installs maybe come through in an IDFA, and that was that key that basically allowed you to see the whole way through the journey and be able to fully track everything. That isn't possible for most of your installs now, and so definitely trying to use other methods of tracking within the limits that Apple set is a really important thing to be able to do, and CAPIs can be a part of that.
So, who's using CAPIs? Like, if you look at the singular customer base, and you've been helping a ton of app publishers and marketers with this stuff, is it mostly your enterprise apps, your bigger apps with huge teams? Is it everybody? Is it people in certain verticals? Who's using them?
So I think it's interesting because, I mean, generally we see it from the enterprise first because they're the ones who have got maybe the more sophisticated setups where they are have multiple platforms, and you have a web presence and an app presence. Maybe they're diversifying into PC console as well, and so there is that real need. But we're seeing more and more some of our smaller customers coming through who potentially might be web only, and that need to optimize is still there. So you still need to be passing this data back to the networks. You still need a mechanism to do that. And as I said before, pixels are a pretty labor intensive way of doing it and not the sort of most efficient way of doing it. And so we do get more and more requests for help with sort of our CAPI functionality.
Pixels are pretty brittle too, right? I mean, like somebody's VPNing, or somebody just has certain settings on their browser for privacy, and they're breaking more frequently. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is seen as a more stable solution for people to be able to use, and that's why it's our recommended way of doing it, because it just gives you that stability. I mentioned about privacy earlier as well in terms of being able to manage your privacy policies. It just gives you a more robust way of being able to transmit information back to the networks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, what I've seen in some cases is CAPIs can be challenging to implement, a little bit difficult. There's APIs to work through, understand. How hard is it, and what can you do to help?
So, I mean, if we talk to our integrations team, they're definitely a more challenging integration than a standard integration that we would do. We look at different integrations that we work with in terms of data connectors that pull cost data and amortization data and things like that. CAPI connectors are definitely the most involved integration that we will do. That's why we're an expert in working with these sort of connectors, and so that's why we tend to do on behalf of our customers rather than customers trying to do it themselves. I don't really I struggle to see a use case of implementing it all yourself when there's third parties out there that can manage it for you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Especially if you're working with multiple partners and you've got to look at all these different conversion APIs, which are probably similar, but also a little different here, there, and everywhere in tricky little ways. If you can get somebody to help you with that, that makes a ton of sense. When you see people implementing conversion APIs, are they typically doing it with one partner? Are they typically doing it with multiple partners?
Generally, you'll have a few, and it's generally the bigger networks. So we see a lot of Meta, we see a lot of AdWords, we see a lot of TikTok, for example, and that all works pretty well with Singular. We're continually adding more to our portfolio of connectors that we have available, so people are able to diversify more into different networks for this. And we also we hear different ones that we haven't got and that we need to add in all the time. So it's becoming more popular. Most people are starting with the big ones first, and then getting it right there, and potentially moving on to other networks after that in various similar ways people do when they're launching app campaigns as well. We think most people start with Meta or Google or something like that first.
Right, right. Okay, let's talk about the use cases. You've already mentioned web marketing, and clearly that's a bigger thing, even if you're an app-focused business, because you're putting ads out there. You might have a web to app flow. You might have a web to PC console flow. You might have a lot of different things going on. Talk about some of the use cases that you're seeing that are most common.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for PC console, we see a lot of customers who will have a landing page there first. Sometimes that will be because you're going onto multiple platforms, so you need to pick the platform that you want to go to, whether you're going onto Steam or etc. Like you need to be able to pick your store, and in that case, you need that sort of central point first to be able to do all the tracking. For web to app I think that's such an interesting use case, and just web in general, where we see a lot of gaming companies that have traditionally been very app focused, and they've started to move more and more into looking at web and how that can work for them. Um, if you don't have this functionality in place and you're driving people towards a landing page and then downloading the app, if you're missing that ability to pass app information back to the networks, is such a key gap in terms of how you can optimize, and the networks just can't see to optimize what they're doing. So yeah, that's why this is really crucial functionality for those companies. And also, we're seeing more and more companies who just have multiple platforms as part of their standard flow. I mean, if you think of most of the on-demand market, that will have web presence and app presence, and so you need to be able to go between the two, and you need all the functionality for those two to work.
Super interesting, because we're entering this time. I mean, we have been for quite a while. We're entering this time where everything is getting more complicated, right? I mean, if you started out in the mobile world, the mobile app world, for a decade or so, you could just like, there we go. That's what I'm in. That's what I do. Right. And now, for a lot of different reasons, you want to be multi-platform. Maybe you want to be able to take payments outside of App Store or Google Play, 30% cuts, right? Maybe you just want to be able to appeal to people who want to be on different platforms. Maybe you want a stronger connection to your customer. Maybe you're hitting cheaper advertising in certain places, and in other cases, like you say, you're multi-platform and you need to direct your marketing wherever it needs to go. It's becoming a much more complex marketplace.
Yeah, 100%. And we're seeing that with customers from every level. So from our biggest enterprise customers to our sort of newest growth level customers who are or maybe launching for the first time. I mean, our recommendation to customers is generally to try and start simple and then add things to it as you go. Maybe keep that overall strategy that you want in mind, in terms of different platforms and how you're going to have the two talking with each other. But definitely like not trying to eat the whole cake at once and implement like app tracking, CAPIs, web tracking, everything in one go, because that can lead to quite a lot of stress, especially for your BI team. So maybe start simple first, and then start to add things in. And CAPIs is definitely one of the things that, as you start to get more mature in your measurement and you're starting to develop how you're tracking things more and more, it definitely becomes a really good tool to add in from there.
Yeah, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, right? So that's one of the challenges there. Okay, so let's talk to somebody who's been hearing about CAPIs for some time, hasn't actually implemented them. First of all, is getting them set up as easy as basically slacking your singular rep and saying, "Hey, turn them on," or is it a little more involved?
So we have solution engineers who will help and give guidance about how to implement it in the best way. It's not quite just a turn a button, it suddenly it will work. There is some work
Come
required,
on,
but it's not
where's the
a
magic?
well, exactly. Well, the magic is our solution engineers who can help sort of just get those last bits sorted in the background for you. But yeah, we need to do a bit of work with customers to get it set up, but it's not overly intensive, and it's a well trodden path now. We know how to do it. We know how to guide customers down the right route. So yeah, it's a good process now.
So that same person is saying, okay, maybe I'll go for it. Sounds interesting. What do you see it unlocking when customers do that?
Um, I think it gives you full flexibility in terms of being able to advertise on any platform, driving to any platform, and then being able to have the full tracking and that full circle. So if you think that you need to be able to set your campaigns up, you need to be able to track them effectively, and then you and the networks need to be able to optimize to get the best out of them, and then keep that circle running to get the best out of your campaigns. And I think that's the key thing that this is unlocking, is it's continuing that constant improvement of your campaigns, that constant optimization, and it does it in the most effective and efficient way.
It also insulates you from platform changes or other things that might happen, right? If there's technologies that big platforms have put in place, whether they're privacy focused or whether they're different, but they affect what you can do, what you can't do in app or wherever, whatever platform you're on, you're insulated from that because your server is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that especially that's another reason for using a third party as well is we see platforms changing all the time, and so using a third party that can help you to keep up with those changes and have someone else have the hassle of updating the APIs and that sort of thing, I would say is definitely a plus, rather than having to do that all yourself. But yeah, it's definitely a whole lot stable than like we were talking about with pixels earlier and things like that in terms of the way of doing it.
Wonderful. Mike, if somebody wants to learn more and they're interested, where can they go?
So, I mean, I think, first of all, speak to some experts about it. So Singular have lots of experts around CAPIs. We're happy to talk to people about it. So it's a case of reaching out to one of our account execs or your customer success manager if you're already a customer, and we'd be happy to talk you through it and go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thanks, John. See you later.